This is the gospel of Jesus Christ according to Matthew, the 28th chapter. After the Sabbath, as the first day of the week was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descending from heaven came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes white as snow. For fear of him, the guards shook and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid. I know that you are looking for Jesus, who was crucified. He is not here, for he has been raised. As he said, come see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples he has been raised from the dead, and indeed he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him. This is my message for you." So they left the tomb quickly, with fear and great joy, and ran to tell the disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them and said, "Greetings." And they came to him, took hold of his feet, and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." The story that we have been telling continues this morning. Now, the details get a bit fuzzy between the different biblical accounts of the resurrection, but the story is the same. In the account we just read, Mary take hold of the risen Lord's feet, but in John's account, they're not allowed to touch him because of some pre-ascension protocol. In John's account, the women let the men inspect the tomb before they have their encounter with Jesus. But here, Jesus just shows up and tells them to go quickly and tell the disciples. In Luke's account, there's a whole lot more women at the tomb, and they are reminded of the words Jesus told them by two men who we can reasonably assume could be angels. And in Mark, Mary Magdalene goes to tell the men that she has seen Jesus alive, and instead of just a doubting Thomas, we get a doubting whole bunch of dudes. None of them believed until the Lord appeared to them and upbraided them for their stubbornness. All of these details serve to help paint divinely inspired pictures of different aspects of the faith that each gospel writer considered to be a priority, but it is the same story they are telling. Jesus, who was dead, didn't stay that way. That's the headline, that's the story, so let's back up. Let's remember where we were in the story when these women were walking to the tomb. Jesus had failed to live up to just about anyone's public expectations. The most extreme of the zealots really misread the whole donkey protest march from last Sunday. They were hoping for a military general that would lead them in an open revolt against Rome. If you want to know what they were hoping for, find yourselves a Bible that has an apocrypha. Read 1st and 2nd Maccabees. Those were the heroic tales of past glory that group was hoping to reclaim. That's what they wanted from Jesus. The Pharisees and the Sadducees and the new, less politically savvy Herod all had their differences, but they also all had a healthy fear of Rome. They didn't want to provoke the empire. They just wanted to keep their heads down so that Rome would allow them to go about their cultural and religious rituals, which was something Rome was actually pretty good at. As long as you paid homage and dues to the emperor, you could worship just about whatever gods you wanted. That kind of acceptance made ruling an empire simpler. Neither the religious nor somewhat secular ruling class of Jerusalem were terribly concerned about the fact that the imperial system itself was leaving the poor and the marginalized to die in the streets. For the Sanhedrin and Herod's court, and let's be fair, I'm assuming for a lot of the less influential people that were working the market, things weren't perfect, but they weren't that bad. They were really hoping Jesus would walk back some of his more inflammatory claims about a coming kingdom. Get the more extreme of the activists out there to settle down a bit, because that kind of talk could get a good deal more than one man killed. So they plot to arrest him. And outside of a line about the devil making him do it, who knows what side Judas was on when he conspired to help. But by the time Jesus is arrested, Jesus has called off even Peter's mild attempts at drawing a sword. He has made it clear to the revolutionaries that he's not going to lead them. But while on trial, he refuses to walk back the claims that the system itself needed to be flipped, that a new kingdom was coming, and that his followers were called to be a part of it. By the time Pilate asked the crowds on Good Friday who to release, there was no goodwill left for him in the public opinion. He was as threatening as the ruling class feared, but rather ineffective to the revolutionaries. At least not effective enough to warrant a resistance effort to free him. The public opinion had become that it probably was best to have Rome kill him. And that's what they did. And he was dead. The story was over. Which meant he had let down these women too. That's where we pick up this morning. Mary and the other Mary did not hold the public opinion. They didn't see Jesus as a figure to fill a public role. He was a person they loved, and like everyone who has ever loved anyone, they only wanted one thing from him: more time. They wanted more of the story. And here it was, over. Sure, there were some rituals of grieving to get through, but that was the denouement. Everyone knows that a funeral is the end of the story. That's where we are as they come to the tomb. The great story of Jesus is over. The impossible command, impossible. Now, it doesn't matter which of the details you want to focus on, because one thing is consistent in all of them. Turns out, the story isn't over. It turns out that the worst can happen, that the story itself can end, and it's actually just another chapter, God's story, of which they and all who received the Spirit became part of that morning. That story is eternal. In this world, it has cycles of death. Death does precede resurrection. That is an eternal truth. But now there are also cycles of resurrection. There is always resurrection. That is the pattern that was established that morning. The cage in which we live is broken. The system itself is broken. Death is no longer the end, and we are part of the story that is breaking it. That should change the way we live, to change the way we encounter our attempts to reach that bare minimum of loving one another as Jesus loved us. Here's the response the women gave when they heard the news. They ran off in fear and great joy. That combination, that sounds like a pretty good way for Easter people to live. Hallelujah. Christ is risen.